everyone has influence. So how do you take those local voices and also empower them to say, you have an inspiring voice, you're incredible. Like here are 5 different pieces of content that you can create to continue adding value in your own city. So it's definitely our moat in the sense like we build community. We really, here's the persona and here's the brand values of a hummingbird. Like we want you to align with that before you sign up.
Welcome to Business Ninjas, brought to you by WriteForMe, where you'll hear from business leaders who are out there growing their business and slaying it every day. Learn from the masters. Let's get started.
Hey everybody, welcome back for another episode of Business Ninjas. I'm here today with Emily Steele. She's the CEO and co-founder at Hummingbirds. Emily, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. We did it.
Yeah, excited to have you. Excited to have you. So, Emily, why don't you start? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I am an Iowa native. I am in Des Moines, and I have been a small business guru, marketing guru, and passionate about the small business local community for I feel like as long as I've been alive, a natural kind of community builder. I took a lot of my passion in marketing and small business and local communities and community development and kind of spun it into a business called Hummingbirds, where we get local people trying and sharing the businesses in their own community and their own backyards on social media. So I've been doing that for about 4 or 5 years at this point. Bootstrap the company in Des Moines, Iowa, and turned it into kind of a venture-backed business that's going national and going to all these cities to really help businesses tap into local voices who are driving behavior for them. So outside of work, I am a mom of 2 littles. I'm passionate about travel, and I just love connecting with people, which is why I love podcasts.
I love that. I love that. Well, it sounds like you've had an interesting journey bringing you to Hummingbirds. Obviously, I love that you love podcasts and a mom. So, you mentioned previously talking a little bit about, being hyper focused on the local. Talk to me a little bit more about Hummingbirds and what you mean by that.
Yeah. So felt like in 2018, I was running a local marketing advertising agency of sorts. And I had a lot of clients that were working with me that were bringing kind of these different strategies over to me as they transitioned from in-house or from another agency. And a lot of the advertising solutions that I became really crystal clear, like aware of, were, the billboards, print, TV, radio, and those have existed for forever, right? Like they've been kind of the go-to local advertising solutions. And here I am thinking to myself, okay, I am not making decisions at a local level based on any of those things. And I'm a millennial. So like there's that, right? Like I'm not watching TV, I'm not listening to the radio, I'm like Spotifying and Huluing, if you will. And I just got curious. I'm like, okay, clients, like who are you trying to target? Like who's your buyer? Like how are they making decisions to come to your shop? Are you really clear on that? And so what we found over time is that a lot of these businesses look to their customers to drive behavior, to get like kind of a referral motion, word of mouth marketing. Like, okay, we have this channel that's really impactful at a local level, but really hard to tap into. And so I really got curious about how do you kind of systematize and strategize around word of mouth marketing. And so Hummingbirds really came of this, like, it was really obvious that influencer marketing was going to blow up at like a national global scale. And it was really clear that word of mouth marketing is very impactful from like a local business strategy. It's impactful for every business, especially in a geocentric way. Like, how do we kind of ride this wave of influencer marketing growth, but do it in a really, really localized way? So that's kind of where my head was at in 2018 when we kind of kicked this off at a very, very basic level.
Yeah. And the word influencer can have a lot of connotation. So somebody once said to me that it's not necessarily like the influencer that you see with hundreds and thousands of followers, but it's more so the everyday person working with local products. Am I right in thinking about it like that?
Totally. Yeah, I think, there's this kind of thought that like, oh, you work with an influencer and they have hundreds of thousands of followers. But if you really think about the people who influence you at a local level, it's probably your neighbor, your favorite barista, like the people you go to sand volleyball with. Like these are the people driving your decision making. And so they're not influencers and yet they have influence. So those are kind of the people we look for.
Yeah. And how do you, and obviously finding those people with influence, how do you find those on a localized level? Is it, a lot of cold calling, or like how do you target who you work with?
Yeah, that's kind of like our secret sauce in so many ways of really understanding the persona of who we call hummingbirds. Like they're already kind of sharing because they want to on social, like their favorite cocktail bar, like the music festival they went to. Like they're actively using Instagram, which is our main platform we see driving the most local behavior. They're tagging the business in the post. They're adding hashtags like support DSM or KC local, and so for us, it's like, okay, who are the people who are already talking local in a specific city? And we invite them to be part of our community, which is, they're really excited. They're like, I already love this city and now I can get perks or payment to promote things. Like, yeah, I'm on board.
Yeah. Yeah, no, totally. I love that. And, I'm curious talking about, shifting not only from the influencers but to the brands a little bit. Do
Mhm.
you have any stories of any successful influencer marketing campaigns that you've implemented?
Yeah, several, which is really exciting. I think like when we look at the customers we work with, some are like looking at kind of that bottom of funnel conversion. Like we want to see people actually physically come here, purchase products. Like we want to track it at like kind of a very, very sales level. And some people are like, we want awareness. We want like strong reach and impressions because it funnels into like our overall marketing performance dashboard, if you will. And so it's interesting to look at, how people really look at success when they're tapping into people marketing. But, one of the things that we just got a testimonial back from one of our customers who runs kind of like a wellness program or wellness company in the area, and she engaged with hummingbirds and she like got her ROI back in like 3 appointments because essentially, someone comes in as a hummingbird, has an appointment, and if they love the experience, they're going to post about it on social to reach their friends, but they're also potentially going to come back to be a customer and then continue to be a referral. And so we're always like, no other form of advertising can also be your customer and like a lifetime champion. Like when the billboard comes down, the advertising stops. When we work with people, it continues. So what we hear from our customers is that, they love the retention as they track it of the hummingbirds who have a delightful experience and then come back for more. And then also just seeing like this customer specifically track like their social media growth as well as their email list growth. And so she really had a firm grip on like, okay, this touches top, middle, and bottom of funnel. And she was able to kind of track that.
I think that's, fascinating. And I'm sure tracking those numbers is so important to tracking growth. And like you said,
Mhm.
understanding what that growth and what those KPIs are to other companies. Because like you said,
Yeah.
some people may want follows, some people may want an ROI or brand awareness. And sometimes if you're speaking two different languages, that can be a really tough to as a position for you to be in.
Yes, exactly. It's just getting really clear, like through the whole sales process of like, what do you think success looks like? Because if you think it's like everyone immediately walks into your store the second they see content, like we have a we're not going to deliver that for you. That's not how it works. So just getting that clarity on the front end is really helpful because we want to bring in the types of customers who do understand and resonate with the value we bring.
Absolutely. And we've talked about building of brands through, word of mouth marketing with those local influencers. Talk to me a little bit about the growth of hummingbirds specifically, because, you mentioned people, posting about being a hummingbird and sharing it that way. So is it also word of
Mhm.
mouth that's helped grow hummingbirds?
Yeah, like we're kind of using the strategy that our brands use to build our own company. So we're very much like tapping into our own hummingbirds to drive our hummingbird growth. Like refer your friends, refer your neighbors, like people who are already like who's influencing you, like get them into our community. And so we definitely look at that. But we also have a team that's really focused on kind of finding those first like 100 people in every city, like to get us started. And the more content that exists on these city pages that we run on Instagram, the virality happens from like a business side as well as the hummingbird side. So we're definitely like quote unquote eating our own dog food in terms of like the and like getting the value of hummingbirds that our brands get, which is awesome.
Yeah. And you mentioned something earlier that I want to circle back to about building the Hummingbird brand and saying that,
Yeah.
you're looking for someone who is passionate about that, the local businesses. Do you think that's one of the ways that Hummingbirds is able to really differentiate itself from its competition, knowing that, not only are you local, is Hummingbirds local, but you care about the businesses in your city, and then you're branching that out to people that share that same passion?
Yeah, I think differentiation is key. Like, I think about our moat, if you will, as a company, and like I've seen so many other companies, like creator um, platforms, like try to do this like nano local thing, and it's first of all, like the brands that they typically bring in are really franchise focused, or like they don't feel local. And the
Mhm.
reality is, like some of our customers also don't feel local, but we pay for campaigns. We find trade partnerships that are those local businesses because we can't promise that when you log in, like everything's going to be like hyper local, like that, like locally owned and loved business in your own backyard. Like it takes time for us to build out like those brands on our platform, of course. But I think that is a differentiator is like we're not necessarily targeting the influencer who wants like to build like a paid like influencer lifestyle. But we are tapping into the people who really identify as kind of like the social media enthusiast, the person who has influence. So influencer isn't like a word we use very often in our brand. However, these are influencers in so many ways. And so, it the reality is like we're democratizing influence, right? Like everyone has influence. So how do you take those local voices and also empower them to say, you have an inspiring voice. You're incredible. Like here's here are 5 different pieces of content that you can create to continue adding value in your own city. So it's definitely our moat in the sense like we build community. We really, here's the persona and here's the brand values of a hummingbird. Like we want you to align with that before you sign up.
And like you said, that communication is so important and having very clear expectations.
Yeah. Yeah. We really try.
I'm curious to pick your brain a little bit, Emily, about common misconceptions because I think that a lot of people understand or think that they understand local marketing, influencer marketing, but may not have a full grasp on it. So, from your perspective as CEO, as co-founder, are there any common misconceptions that you tend to hear often, whether it be from friends and family, from brands, from influencers, anything that you tend to hear often?
Yeah, I think what's been really interesting is, we've talked to businesses, for example, that have tapped into influencers and they're like, it doesn't work. And they're like, who did you work with? And they'll tell me they worked with someone who is like, let's say a Minnesota based influencer. And so this influencer has 250,000 followers. They pay this individual a lot of money to access her network. And just because someone lives in a state or a city does not mean they have influence there. And so if you're paying for access to someone with 250K audience, like the likelihood is that this person has influence in a category, not a city. So this person that I recall, had 250K followers, but she posted her beautiful home. And so people were like looking at her as like how she styled her home, what she purchased online and like from Amazon. And so when she did a campaign with a grocery store in her city, you can imagine that just doesn't translate. So to me, it's like such a no-brainer, but I know for others it's been really confusing to navigate. Um, and so that's one that I'm like, just because someone has like says they live in a city doesn't mean they have influence in a city. So really do your homework if you're a brand looking for that. That's probably the biggest one.
Mhm.
And just like, there's I think the word influencer can feel a little pretentious. And so I think um, yeah, the minute we are like, we're building a local influencer community, people are like, oh, so someone the other day was like, oh, so it's a bunch of Karens. And I was like, first of all, no, that's like an awful weird thing to say. Um, and then others are like, oh, it's a bunch of Kim Kardashians. I'm like, also, no, like that's like not the scale of people. And so I think the influencer space is so new that it's like a little confusing to know and understand what influencer means and almost be able to redefine it at a local level.
Mhm. And I'm curious, when you're talking about doing your homework, it sounds like almost having businesses do, I don't want to call it necessarily an audit, and I don't want to take away from the secret sauce of hummingbirds, but saying
Yeah.
like a lot of it may, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like a lot of what hummingbirds may do is consulting on like helping companies identify their brand and like what they
Mhm.
stand for and what they view as their consumer or their client. Am I thinking of that right?
Yeah, that definitely happens in kind of the sales and onboarding process just to be like, okay, who are you trying to target? Why? What have you done in the past? Like, what are the channels you're using that actually are creating growth? And how do we stack that against or in alignment with the content creator approach? And like, yeah, I think, the people come in and expect to find hummingbirds with 10K plus followers. I'm like, that's like, you're not going to see that. Our platform is all about like create a campaign and people opt in. And so you only get to see the interested hummingbirds as part of like the campaign. And so we do consulting in the sense like we want brands to create campaigns that people are actually interested in. And so there's a level of like writing, right? And like positioning that is really, really critical in that stage.
I think that's really interesting. And like you said, people think that when they hear influencer, they think of, obviously not a great example of Karen and, obviously not another great example of a Kim Kardashian, like two very different spectrum. But helping brands identify, what they need from hummingbirds to be successful. So,
Yeah.
Emily, I think this has been a terrific, conversation that we've had thus far. As we start to wrap up, is there anything that you want to leave our listeners with, whether it be about the growth of hummingbirds, advice that you've received, advice for
Gosh.
brands or influencers, anything that you want to leave our listeners with?
I feel like I would be sad if I didn't mention this, and this is not like a comes from a place doesn't come from a place of ego or like, look at us, look at me. But I'm a female founder and like I have another female co-founder in this space, and we closed a $3.3 million seed round of capital in November. And I think that's a huge deal
Please
for
share.
women in tech, especially Midwest. Like we just like I think women raise 2.2 to 3% of all venture capital dollars. And so I like to be a voice of like, we did it, you can do it. Like, put your product in the market, get early adopters, get people to test it, like, bring something to life, get revenue, and you can raise capital. It is possible. And so I feel like I would be regretful if I didn't share like that little slice of our story that, like, yeah, like we did it. So can you. And I'm always happy to be someone that, another founder could reach out to be like, tell me about my deck. How can I think about this? Who's your network? And be a value there because it's really, really hard for women founders. So just wanted to share that. That's my final note, I think.
No, I think and where can people reach you and reach hummingbirds to learn more about, maybe being a brand or maybe being an influencer?
Yeah, I mean, on both sides. Like we're in 15 cities as of this recording, mostly Midwest at this point. But to be a hummingbird, visit hummingbirds.com and head over to the hummingbird side. Brands, we have just as much information on the brand side. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm just Emily Steele. I'm very active on Instagram because I'm totally a hummingbird. So you can find me there at emily.steele. I hang out the most there in the DMs, but I'm hanging out on LinkedIn too. So
Fantastic. Well, Emily, thank you so much for this conversation. I think this was very insightful, empowering, and I really appreciate you being on Business Ninjas today.
thanks, Kelsey.
Yeah, great to have you.